Today I'll be presenting my project titled Police, Nonprofits, and the Carceral Web as a Mellon Mays undergraduate research fellow. I started this project during the summer of 2023 while at the University of Chicago and will be developing it into a senior thesis via the Sociology Honors Program as well as the Mellon Mays program under the mentorship of Chris Herring. So starting off with an overview, my project is divided into these 6 categories of an introduction, conceptual framework, methods, context, findings, and meaning making. So as mentioned, my name is Frank, and I'm a junior at UCLA studying sociology and political science. And I'd like to thank the University of Chicago as well as Dr. Robert Vargas for hosting me, but also giving me access to this unique data set that I go further into in just a bit. My project's organized around the following research aims of exploring the symbiotic relationship between the police state and nonprofits, as well as reconceiving the police state and carceral apparatus beyond referring exclusively to police departments and officers, which brings me to my research question of what role do police nonprofits play in reinforcing the carceral apparatus via direct and indirect efforts to support and legitimize the police state. My conceptual framework draws primarily from essayists in Insight's The Revolution Will Not Be Funded, who significantly contribute to the idea of a nonprofit industrial complex, as well as from literature on policing and regulatory and cultural capture. My findings pull from a digital archive compiled by the UChicago Justice Lab, including an extensive list of nonprofit records between 2014 and 2019 of organizations that donated at least once to a police nonprofit or police department, or 2 have been identified as a police nonprofit or police department and receiving at least 1 donation. Neither grounding myself in a specific theory or solely in the data itself, I employed an abductive approach to the way I analyze their board members and professional affiliations using the Wayback Machine Internet Archive, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Google to learn more about them. Regarding context and case selection, of the 27 California-based organizations I looked into, the 4 I chose fall into 2 categories. The Sheriff's Youth Foundation, or SYF, and Hollenbeck Police Activities League, or HPAL. They both classify as 501c3 nonprofits, meaning they are tax exempt and that donations to them are tax deductible. On the other hand, I have the Fraternal Order of Police California, or FOP, and Association of Orange County Deputy Sheriffs, or AOCDS. These 2, unlike the other 2, are different categories of nonprofits. FOP and AOCDS are 501c8 and 501c4s, which in general means that they are tax exempt, but donations to them are not tax deductible. But they also had a 501c3 component, which is the reason why they struck the archive's radar during sampling and cleaning the data. So moving on to the study findings, circling back to the literature, I should define that the nonprofit industrial complex refers to a system of symbiotic relationships linking political and financial technologies of state and owning class control with surveillance over public political ideology. In the data, this reflected in the use of success stories as marketing pawns and proof of program success or efficiency. That is, since the nonprofit sector relies on government foundation and individual grants in order to maintain their operations, it is through this same recognized, institutionalized economic model that allows charitable arms to fraternal orders and political groups such as the FOP and AOCDS. Regulatory capture, again borrowing from the literature, is a mechanism by which industry influence shifts regulatory decisions away from public interests and towards special interests. More specifically, the revolving door describes a dynamic where regulatory officials act in favor of industry interests to or which secures them a lucrative job. So introducing you now to Mr. Jim McDonald. Jim is a seasoned former police officer and county sheriff with over 36 years of experience in law enforcement, a vocational investment which has recently landed him a director position at USC's Safe Communities Institute and a CEO title at his own public safety consulting group. In addition to serving as SYF's chairperson between 2013 and 2017, Jim is also an honorary board member of the aforementioned Hollenbeck Police Activities League. So similar to SYF, HPAL has intervention prevention programs catered to at-risk youth in marginalized, primarily of color, communities. And it was in looking closer at Jim McDonnell, the programs at HPAL, and its board composition that I noticed the University of Southern California as a reappearing name. Starting with Jim at the Safe Communities Institute, to lecturers and administrations being on the board, to HPAL's youth delinquency program being entirely run by USC interns. I looked further into USC Safe Communities Institute, where I met Dr. Suthers, a professor there and director within the program, as well as friend of Jim McDonnell and former law enforcement himself. Here are just two examples of reformist research produced by the Institute itself. And it was no surprise that the tax records also showed donations from USC to HPAL in what was starting to look like a symbiotic relationship between law enforcement and the academy, paired with youth programming focused on improving attitudes between law enforcement and the communities that they police. So here's SYF, which by now we've seen bleeds into HPAL with Jim McDonnell as that underlying thread. Having similar programs and in looking at its board composition, we can take someone like Bruce Ray as an example of other resources these organizations have access to by virtue of their board members. So Bruce here is not a former cop, but he is a UPS executive who sits on SYF's board. Pictured to our right is just a snapshot of a 20-year-long deeper involvement with ALEC, which is a lobbying group that faced criticism from activists for its role in supporting the Stand Your Ground law following the murder of Trayvon Martin in 2012. So in these videos, he's spoken to his commitment and key role in garnering financial support for ALEC. Again, in just looking at SYF and HPAL, I came across this petition, one that appeared to be initiated by community members petitioning to save the SYF Youth Activity Center following budget cuts made to the Sheriff's Department. The great irony of or political strategy of this, of course, is that these programs are constantly referred to as vital by the program descriptions, by police apologists, positivists, and most police themselves. But if mending relationships and repairing the police image due to historical, warrior, predictive, broken windows policing regimes is so important, then why are these programs the priority of disinvestment? So now moving forward to the 501c8 and C4, FOP, and AOCDS, unlike SYF and HPAL, these orgs are more concerned with direct support of police departments through legal, legislative, and financial support. They're able to explicitly engage in political activities, such as by writing letters in support of legislation, such as the Project Safe Neighborhoods Grant Program Authorization Act, which is this bill passed in 2018 allots grant funding for developing and executing comprehensive strategic plans and developing evidence-based intervention and prevention initiatives. So unlike 501c3s, organizations like FOP and AOCDS are able to engage in these practices because they aren't actually 501c3s, whose funding have more restrictions against political endorsements, engagements, and so forth. These organizations are often heavily in coalition with each other, as in this case where Roger Hilton, who was formerly VP of AOCDS, and like Jim McDonnell, his buddy Scott Baker here has proved successful in leveraging his own law enforcement in higher education and the security industry. So in essence, we see how through this nonprofit model, police organizations have been able to mobilize with and for the police. And we can think of this as a counterinsurgent effort to reimagining community safety. Furthermore, evidence of regulatory capture and or the revolving door illustrates a dynamic whereby law enforcement are able to leverage their backgrounds in lucrative jobs and positions, which is essentially the use of skills acquired in an industry, the institution of policing, that relies on social destruction in order to thrive, then being transferred to other industries with similar carceral technologies of violence and or punishment. And with that, I'd like to leave you with a quote from writer and activist James Baldwin, as well as my contact information.